Hello everyone, my name is Konstantin Semenov. I'm working at EPAM, and we'll take a look at the situation where we have an analysts horde followed by developers, and they all working with a very important but small group of customers, possibly consisting of one customer. So how do we act? How do we react? How do we proceed so that everyone is happy? Our project is life science. We handle the lab mice. We develop a system for handling lab mice, and our customer is a pharmaceutical company and they need to test them drugs on mice. So we have to develop a system for managing those lab mice, and you need to have domain knowledge. And we have one product owner who is very competent, but is a single person. We are 14 analysts, 10 designers, and overall 180 employees in the whole. So this is how we are working with the project, and we are moving on, carrying on. So I'll tell you how did this all happen. Our main problem started when we increased the number of employees. Previously we had 3 analysts, 1 development team, and this all proceeded in a Scrum cycle with 3-week sprints, but then the number of analysts and designers increased. With 14 analysts, another development team, another integration team came to our company. All in all, we have 7 teams responsible for the different versions of our app. And this growth, which happened in autumn last year, we realized that we don't understand what we are doing right now. We saw that many things are duplicated, there are lots of things to do, there are lots of elephants which we haven't eaten yet. 3 analysts are actively there in the task, but all other analysts don't work. The teams are not aligned and not communicating with each other. And an effort requires support from other team, then they switch to another task and there's no progress. So you can easily say what we're doing right now and what is the outcome. Another problem we've encountered is that we don't know what we're doing tomorrow. So we lost the possibility to predict our results even 1 sprint ahead. So we didn't understand nor what we wanted to achieve now, neither what we wanted to achieve after the next sprint. So every team was planning their efforts differently, because the analysts previously were on the development team and worked independently. So this made us synchronize rally, and oftentimes the plans duplicated each other or were unrealistic, so we could not simply understand when the work is over. Even if one team has planned it, we cannot guarantee that the result is going to arrive as estimated. And everyone was not happy. So this is a model we came up with. We assembled everyone into a so-called product team, and the analysts were then removed forcibly from the development team and merged into one large group. And currently we provide business analysis as a service to the development team. Not a single development team has an analyst. We manage this at an analysis team. And the results of our service, what the developers receive, this is a task list worded as a user story for the next iteration. And there is also a group of architects which helps everyone on our project, and they ensure that the app's integrity and the integration from the architectural point of view. So for this, we have the so-called roadmap of the project. This enabled us to solve the problem when our growth was as very fast. We started to change our approach to planning. Previously, we were planning features. Currently, we plan the value, the added value, which we achieve for the customer. The added value, for instance, for the customer is to transport mice inside the mice storage facility, to plan for the cages for new mice. This process, which is an added value, was then decomposed into different features connected with booking, with identifying mice, with the cage cards, specifying the destination of the mouse. And when we decomposed everything which we needed to do to achieve this added value, this allowed us to determine which team will make this. When our teams were not communicated, we could not do this joint planning, but when analysts are now sitting on a separate team, we now need to synchronize 20 people and on 180. So we were free to choose what we're doing right now, what we're doing in this sprint, on the next sprint. So the developer did not have to prioritize any longer, and the team are very much independent from each other.
So we've decided to do it via iteration planning, separated into 3 sprints. So each feature was divided into 3 sprints, like first analytics, designers, architects, and the third sprint it was the development. So life cycle of any feature we could divide into 3 sprints and work like that. So what did we get from this iteration planning? So the analytical part of work on each feature was divided into ideation, finalization parts. At the ideation stage, analytic understands what exactly he needs. So there is some request from the customer, but it's difficult sometimes to say what exactly does the customer need, what is the value.
Вместе с дизайнером они поняли,
What he needs. And that's where the analytic with the developer understand together what they need, and only at that stage they can prepare some artifact for the development team, like user story and etc. So that's how we found out that for this value, for these features, we could do ideation to understand what is that, why we need it, and then we can write the stories and prepare grooming for the teams and prepare it for the development. In order to divide the requirements into 3 phases of work, we have to know when we have to involve designers and developers. They have to be involved at the earliest stage possible. Designers, they have to work from the very start, and involving architects and developers at the ideation phase, we can be sure that at that moment when the requirements go into production, they will be safe from the point of view of their architecture and feasibility. Well, also we started to appoint teams for large components of projects. For example, if I'm doing tasks on the mice, then I know how to involve the people from the team for mice, and we can discuss it in advance. And when the task goes to the prod, then the whole production team knows what exactly needs to be done. How it works in practice. For example, let's take the ideation phase. So we have some vague idea, and the customer knows something about that, and even less the business analytic knows about that. So at that phase, analytic and business works together, trying to understand what the customer needs, the business needs. And here The designer can also be involved, and the architect, and the head of the development team, which will do that one sprint after. So even at that stage, we already involve just the lead, not the whole team, but the lead and the expert who can take an external view, not the member of the team, but some third party, and to think how in future this task implementation will influence what everything else that's been done. And when the task is completed, the analytic already understands how it can be decomposed, what is the value, how he can describe it with the user story, which other artifacts have to be added, and then the finalization phase comes, and then the customer is not involved, but he just answers the questions, specifies something, tries to look at various specific cases which might occur with this functionality. But the analytic and designer mainly works here, because analytic writes artifacts and designer prepares user flow, interface elements, design model, and everything else that is needed by the development team to take it to the next sprint, to estimate it in the proper way, to plan, and to successfully accomplish. So here the lead of the development is involved. The architect is somewhere close, just helping to keep it within the current architecture, and the team is being involved step by step. So step by step involve testers, developers. Testers make some series of sprint groomings when we convey to the team what they are up to in the next sprint. And the third part is the development. So here mainly the development and the BA teams are working, who provide support, and although the 1 to 3 grooming been already accomplished, but as soon as the task, work on the task is started, the questions come, and that's why the support has to be provided. Also, we managed to change a little bit our communication within the team, because now when we get such a big crowd, so it has to be coordinated in some way within the boundaries in which work analytics and designers mainly. So we had a lot of meetings with various parties involved, and finally we stopped doing that, because if the meeting is not really necessary, we don't hold it. We just left the most necessary meetings, like half an hour a day with each other, and 1 more hour with the customer, and that was it. The rest of the time you just can work and fulfill the tasks. And if there are some emergency issues raised, then we start to do it the second half of the day. So the first half of the day is just calmness and work, and analytic just does something. And then we introduced workshops on some cross-cutting topics, because there is sometimes a very broad topic, a lot of specialists involved, and we had 2 approaches. First is that we break down the task into many components and distribute it among analytics, but when we can miss something because we cut this like in several pieces, and at the cutting point we can lose something, then we can provide some additional analysis, completeness of the requirements, when we take into account not only what is to be done, but take into account all other features it can influence. Also, every topic, every area has a competent owner. It's a person who is immersed in it deeply, knows a lot about it, and if there are some conflicts between analytic and tester regarding the requirements, then the competent owner has the priority. His opinion has a priority. So these are 3 topics overlapping. At some point they're influencing each other, and we can actually separate them, divide them, but we can miss something at this point where we cut. And also everybody who is involved in that, they can be invited to one workshop, they spend 1 day, but then we eliminate all the risks of losing something, some restrictions, and also we avoid the risk of something new breaking something old which already existed in the system. It's like activation and deactivation principle. We have an analytic, for example, who is responsible for mice, for types of cells in which they have to live, breeding issues, categorization, and we have a very useful feature here, helping to transfer an animal from one cell to another. And for that purpose we use an analytics when we need to get some very specific genotype of a mice. For example, we don't have mice like that, so we have to make several mating, so they have to be bred in 4 or 5 generations, and after we do that we get this feature. Also, we take a look at our requirements and try to reduce all the unnecessary requirements, because when you create a huge system with a lot of components in it, you find a lot of synergies. Some things are duplicated, work in the same way. It can be filtration, conversions of groups of business entities. It can be comments, notifications. It can be elements of life cycle. And when we understood that at the very beginning of the project in September, we understood that if we make it each within the framework of his own team, then we get 33 components to be copy-pasted, and which should work similarly, but they don't, because every team does it in its own way. They are not completely equal. Then we started to assemble them in bigger blocks, described with some standard requirements, and when we have to copy them, we make references to already existing components. So, and also they cannot survive without the central core to which they are attached. So if we group something, then we group it around something. If we notify, then we notify about something, right? And if we try to save the history of events, then this is the events, some events. So that's why we have to define quite clearly what is a requirement and what is not, and how this general requirement actually behaves depending on the situation. So there are different requirements on validation of new entities, on visibility, representation. So we have to create a category. It's saved in one place, several stories or one, and the context describing why we need them. When we have to reuse them, duplicate them, then we just make reference to this page, either to the page or to the stories directly. For example, we have to use something else, and we make a reference to something already existing. We don't copy-paste, but we refer to something that's been developed earlier, and the developers can find commits on the previous story that been already completed. So, and we reached the stage when we can add features like with the internet store. I need something, I just find it in the Apple Store, for example, and I just add something I need. For example, we have list of tasks, animals, tags of the animals, and we add it all to the database, and we have new columns like general requirements. And if you want to sort these new entities you create, you don't need new story for the new entities. You just add the entry I need for my entity, and then you put a tick, like this tick is, instead of a tick, you put like a reference to the Jira with the requirements. And that helps us not only to reuse something already existing, but to do it quickly and efficiently. The next challenge we faced was small number of interested parties. We have one product owner and 14 of ours, and so the lack of time and no equality of access. So, and it happens so that one or two analytics could consume all the time of the product owner at once, and then they do nothing because they can't even ask him because his time is consumed, is over, spent. And finally, we reduced the number of communication channels, but we made it more intensive. So we make daily meeting with the owner at some fixed time with a fixed schedule. We have standard list of questions, and the questionnaire has to be filled in a special way, and you can always ask this question, but also you can look in the earlier questionnaires, look at the history of answers, and finally we decided with our product owner that we will coordinate various things in different way depending on their priority. So not everything has to be validated formally. So we managed to simplify the system to make our work with requirements more efficient and quicker. For example, the daily touch point, right? There is a plan always. It starts at 5 p.m. Moscow time. If there is no plan at that time, if there are no requests to discuss something with the customer from the team, so the meeting is cancelled. So it motivates our analytics to think what they're going to talk to the customer about. Also, we collect requests. So those who send the request first, they will talk to the customer first. So it's also the analytic just adds the topic of his discussion, upcoming discussion with the customer. Also, there can be some additional questions asked during the discussion, but the moderator of the discussion is the one who submitted the request, and the main topic is of the one from the request. And after that, we register the final results, what we actually reached during the discussion. So it helps to avoid ambiguity, and finally we can just look what we have decided, what we reached. And if we need to discuss it again, then we can do it in some new way. Also, the list, the page with the questions and answers, because the things that you can discuss in a meeting altogether, very often it's not something very complex which needs a lot of discussion. It's normally just yes and no, and or we can discuss how to do it in the best way. For example, if an analytic offers several options for the developer, then it's first easier to make a meeting, formulate the question, then while we're sleeping the product owner is working and preparing answers for us. When we come to our office next day, we just see or don't see what he has replied to us, but the reply has to be very specific. This and that, in a very concise way, up to the point. And there are some situations when our product owner cannot reply to our question. He doesn't know everything. He has to get advice of the technician and maybe some other experts. So then he postpones the reply. He puts it for the discussion list, to the list of questions for discussion, to the touch point, and then he has to clarify it. And what we've done regarding the discussion. So the first level is when we are creating something completely new, something which was not present in the system earlier. And the setting story is something that sets the foundation from the point of view architecture and design. So it has to be formulated, has to be coordinated with the customer and approved by the customer. Only when the customer says, yes, I agree with this user story, this setting story, then he validates it, and then it's used, and it affects greatly on the acceptance criteria as well. And the second option is when we work with something which we already know, and the analytic probably can know what is this feature, what is expected from this feature. Then it's enough to put this issue on our daily touch point and receive the verbal approval of the customer. So for example, we say, let's do like this, and the customer says, okay, I approve it. This is the simplest way. And the last thing, when we trim something, like the task is almost complete, but we have to make some small changes, then the analytic can decide himself how to do it. He doesn't have to contact the customer. It's just some small things, just to fill the gaps or to remove some small bugs. Another thing is that for every entity, we have to write it in the same way. So irrelevant of what we are developing, we have tried to make all the pages in the same format, so that every analytic writes what's been developed by another analytic, and when somebody is on the sick leave and has to be replaced for some period, then it helps a lot. It's normally business description. So he has to understand why did we actually start doing that, which attributes are used, what are the rules according to which we, for example, can move mice from one cell to another cell. So otherwise it wouldn't work.
So this implementation flow will be responsible for the stages of the completion, so that this value really occurs. And then comes the Jira filter with this storage set, after we worked with all the sound effects. Filter from Jira. This is how it works, not links shared with everyone, because there are lots of us, there are lots of pages like this, and we understood right from the start that it just is not worth the effort to try to keep them updated. So we just have to set up the filter correctly. You know, those bugs and comments are all in the filter, so that he or she does not take the time to transfer this all to Confluence. For this, we use the structure plugin in Jira. Helps us a lot. Another thing is consistency. As we've removed analysts from the development teams, you'll know when an analyst is working with a single team, they get used to each other, because the analyst adjusts the description to the mindset of the team, and the team adapts to the style of the analysts, how he describes business values, acceptance criteria. They start to understand what he really means by writing this or that, so that improves the interaction. But if we have 14 analysts and 7 development teams and everyone writes differently, what should we do? We have introduced a set of rules. How do we do the grooming? So how we do align the analysts for the sprint? This is, well, a set of actions with the detail up to read all the requirements aloud in Russian. Then we always say we and not you when describing it. Onboarding new analysts is also crucial. We were growing fast, and question arose that we should be able to onboard new analysts with the same set of tasks and knowledge, so that they work like everyone else, after 1 month. Only one member of our team onboards the new analysts, and only it's him who makes way after an onboarding period for the new analyst. The new analyst thinks and acts similarly to how other analysts think and act. Another point we've come across, we just added our stories to a certain board in Jira, and the development teams took a look at those stories, but it turned out that the dashboard was set up in a different way by different people, and some stories just disappeared from one's views. And in the middle of the sprint, you just find out that those tasks are not on the sprint any longer. So, for every new sprint, we have a separate page in Confluence. There is a page for every development team, and the analysts add what they want to share, what they must share, and what can be done. And this is the single point of truth for the developers. We have agreed with the management of the development that they also monitor this, and the problem of something missing out from the sprint just disappeared. This page is, well, a single point of truth for the plan for the teams. This is of course time consuming because we have to prioritize stories manually, but this ensures that the developers will receive what we wanted to give to them, what we did in the grooming, and what the customer really wants as the outcome. I would like to make a step aside to the moral side of the questions. Since we removed the analysts from the development teams, there were some demotivation effects visibly. The best way to motivate an employee is to stop demotivating him. But there's often lots of managers who ride unicorns in the clothes and offer you some realistic tasks. And there was a problem of people feeling lonely in a large team. They did not feel involved in the results because they've been removed from the development team, and despite the fact that the analyst has worked a lot on the team, some other team has authored the solution. And this made people demotivated. But there are some tools, there are ways to make this more welcoming. We have the possibility to work in different offices. EPAM has 5 offices, so we can just book a meeting room in another office and make a workshop as if we're working with a customer. So this change of context, bringing people together, people who normally sit at different places in an office, and this gives really best results compared to booking a meeting room in the same building. Telling the colleagues they are really good, they perform really well is also a nice thing. The management rarely does it, so the person stays motivated, and this motivation is sufficient for a long period of time. We were able to have all the analysts on board to retain them. And then extracurricular activities are also very beneficial, like having a party, throwing a party in a bar, or playing some board games. This can be done on your own, and this should not be approved, should not necessarily be approved by the management. This is cheap, this is fast, but this helps keep the performance of your colleagues at a very high level over a large time. So, just to summarize, what can we do? If we separate the analysts into a separate team, analysts should always work together. Even if you think I can work alone, you can always ask some colleagues for advice. You will increase your motivation and your satisfaction from the job, and you also mitigate the risks of conflicts and failures. And risks of impacting other components which you might not have taken into account. You have to reduce the channels of communication with customers. We do not use chats and we rarely use mail, because mail can be read only by one and ignored by others. We only have this Q&A pages. This was a huge improvement compared to the previous situation when everyone was calling and emailing erratically. So, as the analysts are now separate from the development team, we have to involve them into the planning process. Sometimes there has to be a person on a team and deal with the questions which will be scheduled for the next or sprint or for the coming sprints. And there are oftentimes what the UX designers and the analysts have imagined is very difficult to make, to accomplish. And please do not underestimate the use of results of other teams. Reuse them. You will save time if you document your results, and your results can be reused that way. Thank you very much. And now open for the questions. Hello. It's very interesting for the mice, about the mice. Reusage. How do you control that the team, how many teams are reusing the same feature? And when one of the teams requires an extension of the feature or revamping of the feature, how do you evaluate if the change impacts other functionalities? And how do you decide if a separate feature should be written? And do you like mice? Yes, I do love mice. They are lovely. They're lovely. I enjoy tours in the mice storage facility. How do we define or redefine the features that are needed? You need to have the owner of the initial requirements to understand how the new will be different from the old. Next, every team needing it, because there's an analyst working with it, figures out if this new feature can be done with existing things or with the same things that another team wants. An analyst refers to some older requirements, and then the development team, together with the lead, take a look at if they can accomplish this using existing tools. Either they can or not. If not, there is a separate story which can also be not referring to an older one, because there's maybe a feature which cannot suit any pre-existing transformation. For instance, if we sort mice per health builder. So it's something new and should be written from scratch. And then another variant, I'll give you an example. For instance, we had a filtering in a list of some entities. It's not important what they are. And now we have the need to filter it by genes or by owners, so that the owner of the colony can look up at the interface how many helpers how many mice every helper has. And if one handler handles 500 mice and another 30 mice, something has to be changed. So the sorting and the filtration can be done using pre-existing mechanisms. And so we have added both grouping and filtering to any list we now produce, thus eliminating the problem. Let me take one question, because the time is up. Right at the back of the room. Thank you. Thank you for the talk. My question may seem naive, but how do workshop function with you? The brothers Strugatsky, both authors, were asked how they write their stories together, and they said that the first one writes and the second one runs to the publishing houses to see if it's accepted. How is it with you? Normally, at the workshop there is the topic owner, analysts, and maybe some sort of a expert which has the necessary domain knowledge. And we set a specific goal for the workshop, because it's not only about talking with each other and having a good time. Well, we draw at times, we call some designers to draw, like, say a designer should draw a floor across the different topics. So we had a case like this. We sat down with a designer in his office and sketched right away what everyone needed. So that's the action flow. Included everything we wanted to have. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. My time's up.